I just want to, again, briefly talk about the difference between a covenant and a contract. Again, we live in a contractual society. I am going to sign a contract with you to sell you X, Y, and Z for a certain price, and you sign the contract to buy it for X, Y, and Z, and I agree to deliver the materials in a certain amount of time, and you agree to pay the materials in a certain amount of time, and then as soon as we're done with that contract, the relationship is over. The formal relationship is over. There's nothing ongoing beyond the terms of that contract. That is not what a covenant is. A covenant is a commitment to each other as people to be holy, loyal, and supportive in every way you possibly can, like in a marriage. In a marriage, hopefully, you didn't have a list of 15 obligations for your wife, and your wife had 15 obligations for you, and as long as you keep your 15 obligations, that the marriage will stay intact, and if you break the 15 obligations, then you'll divorce each other. That's a contractual way of thinking. A covenantal way of thinking is complete loyalty, complete faithfulness, complete support for one another. You can think, in a sense, between nations in World War II, the United States and the United Kingdom were allies. And there were certainly certain things that they were doing for each other, but they were trying to win the war. And they were supporting each other in whatever way they could and whatever way they needed to win the war. They weren't just signing contracts left and right. They were supporting each other. They were allies. They were brothers. They were comrades. They fought together to win the war with everything that they had, supporting each other in every way that they could. So that is a covenantal relationship. That is an oath of loyalty, to be loyal to each other to death. And it is a blood oath. Covenants were sealed in blood. So in the ancient Near East, this was a common practice. Covenants were a common form of relationship. This was the way that political alliances were formed, was through these covenantal oaths, through these blood oaths, the commitment to be loyal to each other upon pain of death. That's really what the blood is symbolizing. That's what the butchered animals are symbolizing, is an oath to be loyal to each other on pain of death. So we see this in this chapter. Abram takes 3 cows, he takes 3 goats, he takes 3 rams, he takes a turtle dove and a pigeon, and he cuts all of these bigger animals into halves. And what would typically happen in a covenant-making ceremony like this is they would cut the animals in halves, they would pull the halves apart, they would dig a shallow trench where all the blood would collect, and then they would state their commitments to each other, the 2 parties, and then they would walk through the blood in between the animals, and they would get the blood on their feet, and that would be a visible picture that they were going to be loyal to each other upon pain of death. It was literally a blood oath, and this was a common practice in the ancient Near East. Now you might be thinking to yourself, that's awfully graphic. And yeah, it is. That's kind of the point. It's supposed to be graphic. It's supposed to be a sight. It's supposed to be something that you would see and participate in, and that you would not forget that. You would not easily forget that. The blood in the animals and walking through the blood. This was something that was supposed to be burned into your mind, burned into your memory. And so as the Lord instructed Abram to do this, Abram would have understood what he was being asked to do. He understood what was going on here as he prepared the animals. But the funny thing is, Abram prepares this covenant ceremony. He prepares the blood oath. That's a lot of work. I mean, I don't know how many of you have cut 3 cows in half before, but that's not a small task, okay? And so Abram does all this work to get the ceremony ready, and it's all ready. And he says, all right, Lord, it's time to walk through. Nothing. Crickets. Just crickets. The Lord doesn't come. And so Abram waits, and he waits, and he waits, and finally he's trying to chase the birds off because the birds are trying to pick at all of these dead animals. And he waits, and he finally waits so long that he begins to fall asleep, waiting on the Lord to come and fulfill his part of the oath. And this leads us to our second point today, that God in this covenant-making ceremony displays his sovereignty. God displays his sovereignty. Again, Abram spends all this time working, laboring to the point of exhaustion, and finally he falls into sleep. And as he falls asleep, he has a nightmare. He falls into a nightmare in this chapter, a prophetic nightmare from the Lord. The Lord is revealing to him the future, what is going to happen